Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome back. Today we are on part 3 of our building our own home lab, and what we're doing today is we're actually going to configure a lot of this Active Directory excuse me, domain controller that we've been looking at. So the first thing that whoops, I accidentally just slid my notes away. Okay, so the first thing is we already assigned the static IP and changed the name. If you haven't done that, do that first. I'm not going to show you exactly how because I already showed it in my last videos, but you do have to have the static IP and the name. You don't have to have the name changed, I guess. You could just run it, but you want to know what your domain controller is. So that's number one. Now, the other piece we want to do is, if you notice, I created this admin account, and you can see there's only one thing in there. That is what I call, and not everybody calls it this, but I call it a break glass account. So that's why I created it in the last one. All it is it's an admin user, which right now doesn't have any permissions except for domain admin. It's an admin user that has a password that if everything else fails, if I lock myself out of every account, if every admin loses access, whatever, I have one account that the password is stored, I can get into. It's a break glass account. So meaning everything's gone bad, I'm breaking glass, and I'm using this account to start doing some stuff. So you don't have to do that. You really don't have to do it at all on this because, like me, if my server or if my home lab breaks, I'm not that concerned about it. I just rebuild it. So let me know what you guys think about that. But because some people like them, some people don't. I've always used them. So first things first, we have to start creating GPOs. So that's one thing we have to do. But first we have to create our OUs, right? What are we going to do? Now, we have our stuffy company, right? So we're going to go ahead under here and we're going to say, we're going to new OU, right? We're going to just name this Stuffy Corp. If you guys, most of you guys probably know this if you follow my channel for a while, but like all my CTFs I make and all that stuff, I name everything Stuffy Corp. So it's just easier. Okay, so we have Stuffy Corp, and then, whoops, didn't mean to write it. And then here we'll say, okay, we want another new OU underneath Stuffy Corp. And this is where we're just going to say we want our regular users, right? So we're going to say users. And now you can see under here we have users. Whoops. And then under users, I'm going to actually create another one. And you can do this however you guys want, by the way. This is just how I like to categorize them. I'm going to name them admins. And then I'll name regular users, right? And then under users, I'm going to go ahead and say I want users, right? So first things first, if you guys are liking this content, hit that like button, hit that sub button because it helps out tremendously. It's the only way to continue to grow. I say that every time, but seriously, I really appreciate it. I've seen a lot of good feedback on these videos, so I want to help you guys and keep growing this home lab, and we can get really deep into it. I know a lot of people said they want to see some of the offensive and defense and blue team stuff on this lab, and we're going to get to that, but you have to build the lab first. If you don't build it, there's nowhere to pivot, there's nothing to do. If I just have a couple users here, then what am I going to do? I mean, if there's nothing to do. So we've got the users, we've got admins, and we got users. Okay, cool. Now, one thing we're going to create here under Stuffy Corp, so we'll just leave that there for now. We'll go back, whoops, new, not view. We'll do another OU. And this one we're just going to name groups because we need to know what groups are we going to actually have, right? And some of them might be, you know, whatever. I mean, I haven't actually come up with a plan yet for what this company does, so the groups will look slightly different. So doesn't really matter, but we will put in here for now. We'll just put in here security groups. You can put whatever you want, but for now that'll be one we'll put in there. And then now keep in mind, if you don't know, a lot of people know that domain controllers control the users. A lot of people know that. The reason a lot of people know that is anyone that's worked help desk has reset passwords and stuff like that in Active Directory. But what most people don't know is it also controls your computers and servers. So we're going to name computers. Oops. Right? So now we have computers, and under computers we want to distinguish the two. So we're going to say servers, And then we want workstations, right? Because we need to know the difference between people or computers and servers, because if you're using a workstation to do your normal job, it's not going to be managed the same way that a server will be. It doesn't make any sense, right? So as of right now, all we're doing is we're organizing how we want things. And like I said, do this how you want. Come up with your company, whatever it is, whatever you've done, and configure it how you want, right? But make sure it is somewhat in here. And here's something I'm going to be honest with you guys. The next one I'm going to show you is something that when I do assessments of companies, I see this as one of the biggest problems they have. And it happens all the time. It's just creep. Meaning, if you guys don't know what creep is, it means over the years they've gone through so many things, especially older companies, that their security starts to creep out of the scope of what it should be. So what this is, and this is why you build a home lab, because a lot of people probably don't even know what these are. And I'll tell you. So I'm going to build one called service accounts. These are accounts that are needed to run applications. Okay. The reason they have their own OU is because they're managed completely differently. They should not have interactive logins unless needed for something specific, those types of things. So service accounts have to be separate. Where I see a lot of people, and when I say a lot of people, I mean a lot of companies mess up, is people bypass their proper procedures to create service accounts and things like that. And when they do that, they actually are creating them in users. Why is that a problem? Because now I can use that service account to log in. And those are accounts that usually the passwords are either A, not changed, or B, they're programmatically changed. So they're a little bit more risky, and they usually have admin access to certain applications. So that's why. All right. So we've got our little setup here, right? So these are all built in, right? We could just do this, right? We could just go into computers, put it in there, add an OU in here for workstation, stuff like that. We could do it here. I like to start fresh. That's the reason I have it this way. Do it how you want. I'm just telling you, this is why I have it, right? You could just go over here to employees and create them in here. Could do all that. I like to start fresh. I like to have just a nice tree that I've set up, I've created, right? Don't have to do that, but that's me, okay? So now we could do a couple things here. We can create a few people, right? A few users. We can do that. But first, what I want to do is I want to open up group policy management. And the reason I want to do that, I type P, so the way I like to do this is I like to set up the environment before I start adding users, because I want to make sure I fully have it figured out. I don't like to have a bunch of users added in there and then be like, what should I do? So if you've already created users, don't worry about it. We can move them around and stuff, so it's no big deal. But I have not created any users. So you see my forest here. Here's my domains. And you can see here's your group policies. If you guys don't know what group policies are, these are the policies that we're going to apply to those OUs, those organizational units. And what it's going to do, so for instance, if I apply a group policy to the users, to the regular users, right, that controls the security configurations for that set of users. Same with computers, right? I could do things like with computers, I can make it so you can't shut the computer off from here. You have to be physically in and push the button. Now, some people might say, why would you do that? Well, as you know, when an attack occurs, right, a lot of that stuff the attack is stored in RAM. Well, if you can't turn the computer off remotely, unless you're physically there, I can still save that RAM, right? So things like that, and there's ways around all that stuff, but I'm just saying those are like little security configurations that you can edit. You can make it so certain applications they can't access, all kinds of stuff. So let's go ahead, look at our domains. That's our domain, obviously. Boom, and you can see we have our, come on, there we go. Okay, so we have here our starter GPOs, we have our Stuffy Corp, we have the same thing here, right? But there's nothing applied to these. So these are just, you can see the reason I could say that is if you look, go to servers, workstations, right? We'll go to groups first. We'll go to users first. And we'll go to regular users. Now there's certain policies that we want every regular user to have, right? For instance, password policy. And you can see there's no GPOs here. So we need to create those. We need to create a group policy, right? So we can go to starter GPOs, and you don't have to, but this is just the easiest way. And we can create a starter GPO one. You don't have to. Like I said, I like to start fresh. So I like to start with my, over here, my users, admins, all that stuff. So that's just me. But so what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay. Yep. All right. So this is the default domain policy. This is, again, default. So nothing's changed on this yet, right? So you can see, is it enforced? No. So we have it, but it's not enforced, excuse me. So we need to get it set up, right? So we need to edit this. So if we go right here, we should be able to edit it. And all we're looking at is where is it enforced, right? The following sites, domains, OUs are linked to this GPO. So there's nothing actually enforced here, but this is the default domain policy. The reason this one is the one we're going to focus on first is because there's going to be different policies for different users, different workstations, all that stuff, and we're going to get into that. But the main thing I want you guys to do is make sure your default policy is at least secure enough to do baseline configurations, if that makes sense. So what I mean is, like, you don't want your password to be set for 2 characters. You don't want the lockout to be after 282 attempts, like things like that, right? So so now we go to policies, and you can see this is all one default domain policy, but we're looking at, so here's your computer configurations, which you could set up your basic computer configuration. So this is, again, everything under this domain will fall under this, and then we can set specific ones for different workstations and stuff if this thing stops. Okay, so we're going to go through computer configurations. We're going to go through here and look, and we're going to set the password policy, right? So we're going to go to Windows, Settings, then we'll go to Security Settings, right? Okay, you can see there's a lot here, right? There's really not a lot. I shouldn't have got crazy with saying a lot, but there's a good amount. So the first one we want to edit is this account policies, right? We want to set this 2 of them, right? We want to set both of them. We want to set the password policy. So you can see right here, let's edit this password policy. Well, enforce password history, 24 passwords remembered. Maybe you can do that. That means it's going to keep the password history for 24 passwords, meaning basically it says, hey, don't reuse your password. How many passwords back is it going to go? 24 seems like a lot. I'll do 10. It'll remember the last 10. Again, you guys want to set these to whatever like makes sense for your organization that you're creating. So think it through. What I mean by think it through is, and you can see it's going to remember the number of unique passwords. It'll tell you each one. So when I say think it through, what I mean is think about what your business does and whether or not this is a real business or not. Think about what your business does and think what makes sense, right? If you have a business where somebody logs in, 52 times a day for something, then maybe make the account lockout policy a little higher because they're logging in all the time. They might make mistakes, that type of stuff. Maximum password age. So we'll double click this one and read it. So always go to the explain. Determines the period of time that a password can be used before the system requires them to change it. So 42 days is a very specific amount. I don't want to change my password every 42 days. So the users, I'm going to set, so this Windows license only allows 180. So I'm going to set it for 180. Or I'll do 160. So we do have to change them once, right? Click apply. So now, instead of changing your password every 60 days, I'm going to make them change it every 160 days. Again, do whatever you want on this. I'm choosing 160 because I know the Windows license is going to run out at 180. Doesn't really matter. Minimum password age. So click here. So the security setting determines the period of time that a password must be used before the user can change it. Meaning, if you set a password, right, you can't just go change it right after. You just set that password. You have to let it run or be on there for at least a day before you can manually change it. So we'll leave that. That's fine. Minimum password length, 7 characters. That's not good enough for me, right? I'm a security person. I want at least 14. And that's the minimum. you can do, or the most you can do. I want at least 14. So that's what I want, right? Now, minimum password length audit. Read this one. Security setting determines the minimum password length for which the password length audit warning events are issued. So you should only enable configuration setting when trying to determine the potential impact of blah, 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 blah. Okay, so what this means, the audit is actually the logs you're going to get. So what they're saying is the minimum password length for which password length audit warning events are issued. So if you're getting, let's say you set the password for basically right here, if its setting is defined as less than or equal to minimum password length. So let's say you tell your people you should do 20 character passwords, but the setting is only 14. You can set it up. It'll send you audits or logs. It won't send them to you. It will audit them, put logs out there for to basically say, hey, this person only has a 15 character password. Maybe we should bump it up. I'm not going to define that because I don't want to eat up the logs. So that's another thing to think about your business, right? Is logging is expensive in reality. Here, we're going to export them to a SIM, but we're going to have all of that stuff here. So keep in mind, the more you ingest, the less amount of time you can keep those logs because you're going to have more of a database that you have to start to purge. So we're going to try and keep them as low as possible. I don't really care if they're doing 14 character passwords. I don't really care if they're doing 15 or whatever, as long as they're meeting that requirement, which they have to. Okay, password must meet complexity requirements. So this is exactly what you think it is. This is the English, uppercase, lowercase, digit, noun, alphabetical, blah, 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 right? So we want that enabled. And then we don't really need we definitely don't want to store passwords using reversible encryption. I'm not really sure a use case for that. I'm sure there is. Maybe you have some sort of setting or setup company where you need to be able to see people's passwords or something, but I don't see the need for it. So now we need to go to the account lockout policy, and this one's pretty easy. Account lockout duration. Well, let's take a look. You can see the setting determines the number of minutes a locked out account remains locked out. So this one, a lot of people will debate, and I say debate, they won't actually debate, but what they'll do is a lot of people that are learning about security will say, well, you should lock that out permanently because otherwise people can keep guessing. And while that's true in a utopian society where everything's perfect, that would be great. But the reality is, if I do that, let's see, because the account lockout duration is now 3 minutes, saying the following. Okay, so if I do that, if I set it to where it doesn't unlock, if someone comes in the middle of the night, gets a list of my users, comes in the middle of the night and just sprays all of them, everyone comes in the morning, nobody can work anymore because we have to go through and manually enable those accounts again. And I say manually, you can create a script to do it, but I'm just saying that's one of the issues you run into is a DOS attack, right? That's denial of service pretty fast. So if you lock it out for a little bit, the attacker will stop, right? Because he can't keep spraying it. And that person can then get back to work in 30 minutes. The other piece is if they just make a mistake and type their password too many times, it doesn't actually, they don't have to go call the help desk and be like, hey, it lowers some of that admin costs. So the account lockout threshold, it auto set this for me. It just said it did after 5 login attempts. That's fair. I think 5's good for what I'm doing. Allow administrator account lockout. So this one, it's not defined, which means it's not going to lock out the admin. I'm going to say define it, disable it. I do not want you to be able to lock out the admin account. Now, some people will argue with this again, and this is where the security settings have to make sense for you, but some people will say, well, that's not very secure. They can they can just keep spraying at your admin accounts. Correct, but they'd also have to know it's an admin account and have access to that account. So it's a risk I'm willing to take because I also will make my admins, if you remember we have the admin OU, I will make their password policy much stricter than, and I will say Windows can't make it much stricter, but there's tools you can put on top of it. We're not going to do that in this lab, but there's tools that you can put on top of it to make it even more strict, like make it 20 or 30 characters. Reset account lockouts counter after 10 minutes. So what that means is after 10 minutes of they stopped logging in, then it will allow them to basically try 5 more times or before it relocks it out. Now, I'm going to do 20 minutes, just preference. It's got nothing to do with like any specific reasoning. The other thing to keep in mind here is if you're creating a company, right, while we're doing this home lab, if you're just doing it like I'm doing it, which is I'm just kind of making up a company as I go, do this. That's fine. But keep in mind, if you're making a company that handles PCI data, like payment card industry, things like that, make sure you're looking at those compliance rules and those regulatory rules, and you're matching up your policies with it. Make sure, right? And this lab, I'm just gonna tell you guys, this lab is gonna get very deep. And what I mean by that is I'm gonna show you exactly how businesses work. We're going to do this, right? We're going to set up Active Directory. We're going to set up the users, all that. But then we're also going to create policies. And when I say policies, I don't mean like password policy, account lockout policy. I mean like physical written policies that the company or the employees, even though there's no real employees, the employees have to sign or agree to the policies, right? This is how companies work, because then they can't go back and say, well, I didn't know. Well, you did know because we have the policy set up, right? So now let's go. We've got the account policies. Now we need to actually go through and look at the, right now that's good for now, but let's go to the event log. Okay, that's fine. We don't need to do that for now because we haven't defined what we're going to log yet. But where is it? There we go. Advanced audit policies. So now we're going to go through and we're going to actually set the audit policies. This is what you're logging, because you just don't have the time in reality to log everything. When I say the time, I'm sorry, you don't have the resources to log everything, because if you log to every single event ever, basically you're going to be able to keep those logs for 20 minutes, and then you're going to have to purge them because you're going to run out of stuff, right? So we'll go to audit policies. Here we go. There we go. Okay, I just wanted that so that you can see the name. So account login, right? Do we want, first things first, do we want to actually log the account logins, right? Those types of things. So we went to, let's see, account login. Okay, so audit credential validation, and again, it will tell you exactly what it is when you double click it, explain it. This policy setting allows you to audit events generated by validation tests on user account logins. Events that only occur on the computer that is authoritative for those credentials, Okay, so here's a big takeaway. Volume is high on domain controllers. What does that mean? It means that it's high. We're going to get a lot of volume here, right? Meaning we're going to get a lot of logs, and we have to ingest them, right? So do we want to do that? Maybe, right? As of right now, no, because what they're saying is that's the actual Kerberos authentication. Do I need that? Not right now, because we don't really have any applications or anything that are going to need it right now. Maybe future, right? But here is the account lockout, right? So audit account lockout. Do we want to audit the account if an account's locked out? I don't need the successes, but I do want the failures. Now, would I like the successes? Yeah, I would. Let's go ahead and do it, right? We'll see how much it actually eats, but you can see explain volume's low, right? That's good. So that means, okay, I can risk doing the successes and failures, right? So this policy setting allows you to audit events generated by a failed attempt to log onto an account that is locked out. That is locked out, meaning if someone successfully logs into an account that is locked out or fails to log into an account that is locked out. I need both. Typically, you're going to see more failures, right? But you could see the success. So what I mean by failure is if you're seeing someone brute force or password attack or password spray a account, typically you're going to keep seeing it fail, right? Because they're still guessing passwords. Now, audit log off. I don't care when you log off, right? Some people may say, yeah, it's good to know when they log off, but think about like when you're working or when you're at your home computer, a lot of people don't log off. They just wait till it goes to the sleep screen or whatever, right? So now we'll go here. I want the audit log on success and failures. I want both. I want to know when you fail, when you log on, when you succeed, when you fail, all that stuff, right? I want all of that. So go ahead here. See this one? The policy setting allows you to audit other log on, log off related events, such as terminal services session disconnects, new terminal services. So things that are not just interactive logons, meaning like your regular logon. I want that, right? I definitely want that because I want to know if somebody starts using the terminal to log in, right? All right, that should be audit group membership. So this one you don't have to have on, but this will be. So if you guys don't know how a SIM works, which we're going to set up a SIM eventually, is the SIM will ingest these logs. So you have to have these logs on for the SIM. And this is one that you would want for your SIM and stuff. But it allows you to audit the group membership information. So if something changes, it'll let you know. So I'm not going to turn that on currently because we don't need it right now. Let's see. So policy changes if anything changes. Again, not going to turn any of that on right now. You guys can. The reason I'm not doing it right now is because we're going to be making a lot of changes to this. So I don't want it to just start generating a bunch of logs as we're making a bunch of changes. Hopefully that makes sense. So I'm showing you guys the bare basics. You guys are going to define your policies for your company. Keep in mind in the group policy manager, and I'm going to go through and I'll show you guys in the next video the changes I make because I'm going to go through and completely set up all my settings and everything I want. But I'm going to go through and make sure there's a lot of things that my regular users can't do. There's a lot of things my admin users can do, et cetera, et cetera. But once we've actually created this, right, now we just have to go to the OU, which if we go back, right here, the OU we want, and you can see we really want it to apply to, where's it at? Here we go. Stuffy Corp, all of these, right? We want to go to this OU and we want to say create a GPO in this domain and link it here. So do we need to create another one? No, we want to link an existing one, but we don't have to here because it's right here for now, right? So what I mean by that is this is the default domain policy. That's what we adjusted. So this one's already applied to everything. We don't have to do anything, okay? That is the applied one. And you can see this is who it applies to. Everybody. All authenticated users. So the default one we don't need to mess with. But we do need is, for instance, we want to go to, let's see, we'll do the workstations first. So we'll go to computers. We'll go to workstations. And this is where we'll create a GPO in this domain and link it here. So we're going to name this. And we're just going to name it Workstation GPO. You can name it whatever you want, right? Now, we say, okay. Okay, I'm back, guys. So if you guys don't know, just a heads up, I record these videos as I get time. So when I run out of time, I have to stop the video and then come back. So that's why there's cuts in some of my videos. It's because I run out of time and the video went longer than I wanted, but I still want to get you the good content. So, all right, so let's go ahead and leave where we left off, which is we just created this workstation GPO, but we haven't done anything with it yet. So let me go up here and get my notes, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to actually do something with it. So you can see the default domain policy, we changed the password policy and things like that, but we're going to go ahead and actually go through this workstation GPO now. So first things first is we're going to edit it. So we're going to click Workstation GPO, and you notice it's under the workstations. So this is only going to apply to the workstations as of now. So anything we put into this OU, it will apply. Anything else, it will not. All right, so what we're gonna do now. All right. Okay, so you can see we have policies. We'll let it ride here. We're going to go to Windows settings, and then we're going to go to security, right? As it loads. And we're going to set these policies specific to what we want the actual workstations to do. keep in mind the workstations are going to be different than servers, right? If it loads here. There we go. Okay, so when we go to security settings, we're going to see a whole nother list of settings that we can actually change, right? Now, you can change some other stuff on it too, right? Like you can see there's startup scripts, there's printers. We don't care about that because I'm not putting a printer on this just because I don't need to. But we can go ahead and start going through these and start looking at what do we need, right? So audit policies, what do we want to log on the actual server or on the actual workstations, and the log on events and all that stuff. I know we did that for the people, so, or for the users on the domain policy, but do we want to do that for here? So if you guys look right here, you see it says enforced no. So what that is if we have conflicting things, meaning this one, I actually went in here and said, go ahead and log these. And then on the default domain policy, I say don't log them. If I have one that's enforced, it's going to overwrite. It's going to enforce it no matter what. So that's kind of the purpose, right? Otherwise, they go in order that they're in. So, okay. So now we have the workstation. We're going to go to user rights here. And we're going to go through here and look. What can they do? Right? Can we access this computer from the network? We're not going to define it, but they should be able to, right? These are just workstations. So let's go ahead and look at it. We'll just take a look like we did before and explain it. So this user right determines which users and groups are allowed to connect to the computer over the network. So it says here RDP are not affected. So what that means is, can other things access this? Not RDP, other things. Again, you don't have to define them if you don't think they're going to be relevant, right? Allow log on locally. So should you be able to log on locally? Well, let's see. So look, what's this mean? Determines which users can log on to the computer. Now this actually is a policy that I will apply to my admins, right? But you can see on domain controllers, account operators, admins, backups, blah, blah, blah. On workstations and servers, admins, backups, operators, again, power users. So do I need to put this under the workstations? No. But I might later, right? The main reason I'm not doing it now is because we don't even have any workstations. So things are going to change in these, but I need you guys to change them as you go to what makes sense to you. Because if you just mimic mine exactly, you're not actually learning anything. You're just copying me. I want you to create your security posture for your company, quote unquote, so that you have a system that's built, and then we can build on that and add sims and logging and scripts and things like that, and then attack machines, and then we can start going there. So let's go ahead and keep looking. Deny access to the computer from the network? No, that doesn't make any sense. Deny log on locally, meaning can we locally log in instead of actually log in with a domain admin account? The reason I'm not going to do that is because I might actually need to access this locally. That's the only reason. Let's see. Device drivers. Let's see if there's anything that we need. I don't see anything crazy here that we actually need. That we need to set, but that's all right. The audit, we're fine with the audit. Let's look at the security options. Administrator account status. So let's look at this. So explain this. The security setting determines whether local admin account is enabled or disabled. So do I want the local admin account disabled? I want that disabled. I'll just tell you now. On workstations, I want the local admin account disabled. Why? Because the company that I'm creating, I do not need a local admin because I will have domain admins log into it. If that server, keep in mind, this is a company that I'm not concerned about. What I mean by that is if that server goes down, I will rebuild it. Okay, that is my contingency plan. It is to rebuild the server. My contingency plan is not to then go log into it with a local admin account and put it back on the domain. That is not my contingency plan. Reason being, none of mine will be critical, meaning business will not go down. If you're building a company where a server needs to be critical, well, this is workstations. This is not servers. So maybe it makes sense for you to have your admin account, your local admin account, enabled on workstations. It doesn't make sense to me because if you crash your local machine, I'm going to re-image it and I'm going to give you a new one. Move on. Done. That's my contingency plan. That is mine. Make yours, right? Block Microsoft accounts. I'm going to do this. Why am I going to do this? Because I don't want someone logging in with their own Microsoft account. They have to use my users can't add Microsoft accounts. I don't want them to add or log in with Microsoft accounts. Why? Once again, I don't want them to. What if you had a personal Microsoft account? I don't want you to use that on my work computer, right? Things like that. Guest account. Properties. Disable. I don't want a guest account. Now, a lot of you might say, well, these are all probably disabled by default, some of them. That's true. But I want to set this policy specifically for workstations so that when I go to servers, maybe I do want that admin account. Maybe I do want something like that. Limit local account use of blank passwords to console logon only. Doesn't matter. I just took off the admin account. Now, console login's a little different, but that's okay. Rename administrator account. So this is one where if I wanted to, and on the servers we'll do this, if I wanted to, I will say instead of making the local admin account administrator, which is the default Windows admin account, on the servers, when I set the server policy, this is workstations, I will enable the local admin account and I will name it something else like stuffy admin. The reason I do that is so that an attacker doesn't just come in guess administrator and know that local account name. That's why. Rename guest account, we're not going to do that. Audit, again, these are all audit stuff. Allow undock, okay, allow to format, and eject removable media. So do I want them to format and inject or eject media? No, I don't. So you can see this capability can be given to blah, blah. So we'll leave that for now. We do not want users to install printer drivers. Why? Pretty self-explanatory. There's no printers on this. So if you're installing a printer driver, you're doing something wrong. There's no printers allowed in my network. Okay? Restrict CD-ROM access to locally logged on user only. Now, I don't want anyone to have so the security blah 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 determines if local access is enabled. I don't want them to have CD-ROM access, right? So we'll disable it. And you can see you can go through all of your settings, and I'm gonna skip it. I'm not gonna make you guys sit here and watch this. I'm showing you the example of set all these settings, right? So we set it. Let's just pretend we're completely done with this, right? I'm gonna go through and do this offline. If you guys want to see it, let me know in the comments, and I will, I guess, record me just going through and changing every setting. But that's the workstation GPO. I'm gonna leave that, okay? Meaning I'm gonna go back and do it all later. I'll have next video. We'll have a workstation GPO. We'll have a server GPO. Now, the other thing we need to do is we need to actually take those GPOs, and then we need to go through and make them stricter on servers. For instance, if this was a real company, I would probably have like a 10 or 12 character password limit, but on the admin accounts I'd have a 14 or a 16 character password limit, etc. Those types of things where you're going to make it a little stricter on the servers and the admin accounts, stuff like that. Go through and do all that. But now we need to go ahead and go through our groups, right? So we need to go through our groups, and here's our security groups, right? And we don't have any right now, so we're going to say new. Not view, new. Okay, it didn't actually say new. Okay, we'll go to, it's because we're in group policy management, not Active Directory. Active. So you can see I typed Active Directory. If you ever hear someone refer to this as ADUC, ADUC, Active Directory users and computers, that's very common as well. So you can see the group policy management is for GPOs, group policies, things like that. You guys go through and build it your way. I can't emphasize that enough because you're not learning from just following me. You're not. You need to build it the way that your company is, right? So now we're going to go through, and you can see we have our GPOs, and we're going to say Stuffy Corp. And this is why I keep everything separate, because these can get confusing if you're using the already integrated ones. I'm just going straight through here. Going to groups, security groups, and we're going to say new. All right, new, and we're going to say we want a new group, Okay, so the new group, there's going to be a handful of groups. So first one I'm going to do is just admins, right? And we're going to make that global. Doesn't really matter because we only have one domain here, but we're going to say, okay, security group, admins. Okay, so it already exists. So what we'll do is we'll say administrators. Doesn't really matter. The name admins already existed, but I don't want to use, okay, it's because it's a local group already existed. We will say Stuffy24 admins. Doesn't really matter what you name it. I like to start fresh. You can see admins is already up here. That's fine. Doesn't really matter. That's my break glass account. It's different. I'm going to only apply the, I'm going to have its own group policy where it has access to everything in case something happens. And then, so here we have security group. We created one. We're going to create another group. And this one's going to be help desk because we need help desk to still have some permissions, but not everything. Because if they have everything, then we're in trouble. Then we're going to have another group, and we're going to name them users. This is where our everyday users are going to be in. Okay, because it already existed. So we'll say, once again, whoops, not that one. Once again, Stuffy24 users. And you can name whatever. I just like to have everything separate so that I can control all of it, right? Now we'll say another one. And the last one we're going to do, and we've already created this one, is service accounts, right? Okay, so there you go. Service accounts. And you can see service accounts is down here, but it's not necessarily a group. This is an OU for them. So keep everything separate. What I mean by that is these are security groups. This is where our groups are, where we'll set permissions. These service accounts, that's where I will put the service accounts for the GPOs to be applied, right? Not the permissions. Keep that in mind, right? Okay, so now we're going to create a couple of different things. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to security groups. And again, I'm not going to walk you through every single one because I want you guys to configure them the way you want. But we are going to go through some of them, right? So I will go through help desk, and I'll just go to properties. And all this is so that I can actually go through, and you can see members. There's no members. So we have to create at least a user to put into here to test everything, right? So we'll do that, right? But that's all right. For now, we'll leave it as is. We will put someone in there. You can see they're a member of, managed by, there's nothing because there's no users yet. So I like to get my stuff set up before users. Some people like to put their users in, then get the groups and just drag them to it. However you guys want to do it. So let's go ahead and go through. So just looking through my notes here. Okay, so there's a couple of things to take away. One of them is help desks should have special permissions. And what I mean by special permissions is they should have control over the users. When I say control, I mean they should be able to change their passwords, stuff like that, right? So that's one thing that we need to do. So we need to set a help desk GPO where they have special passwords, right? I'll do that on the side because we know that they need special permissions, all that stuff. But what we need to actually delegate control of help desk. And the reason we need to do that is because if we don't, they don't have any control over it, right? So what we did is we went ahead and created the help desk security group right here. And I'm using help desk because it's one of the few that need delegation. And we're going to say, okay. And then we already named it and everything. And we're going to go to properties, like I said, and then we're going to delegate it control. So you can see here, it's a global, universal, blah, blah. Now, who needs access to it right now? Nobody, because we don't have any users. So once we get users, we'll add access to it, right? So now you're going to go ahead and go right here to security groups, go to users, because this is where our users are. Okay, and we have regular users, right? Now, we will have, under admins, help desk will probably be part of them. I might create a separate OU for help desk specifically. I haven't decided yet because help desk typically has some admin roles, but I can create a GPO for them or whatever. So now what we're going to do is under users here, we're going to delegate control. And what this is who are we going to give access to this, right? Who's going to have control of this, only this OU? And it's the users, right? And we want the add, and we want the help desk. Check names. And you can see that's an object. So when we go there, we say, okay, help desk, okay, select users and groups. So I'm adding a group. The group is called help desk. Now, what can they do? We want them to be able to create, delete, and manage user accounts because we need them if we get a call or whatever. They need to create an account, whatever. Reset their user password. We need to do that. Now, one thing here with the user accounts, some help desks don't have that permission to create, delete, and manage because they don't want them to do that. They just want them to reset passwords and stuff. I'm a small company here. We're just going to have them create them as well. They are not going to read all user information. They cannot manage groups. Let's see. Create, delete, manage. Nope. That's it. I just want them to be able to delete and reset passwords. That's it. Create, reset, all that stuff. You can create custom tasks, but right now I just need manage or help desk to do this. So this is how you delegate control to certain OUs. So now help desk has the permission. Once it's finished, help desk has the permission to actually go through and edit any of the users. So to give that an example, we will actually go in here, right? And we will say new, there was new in there, new, and we're gonna say user. And we're gonna name this user whatever. We'll say John Smith. That's the first guy at our company, John Smith. Now, user logon name. Now this can be whatever you want, but I'm gonna keep it pretty normal. And I'm just gonna say J Smith. That's how I'm gonna keep it. First name, last name, super simple. J Smith, his password, I'm going to set his password to the same password that every account on my system is set to. Now, I will go through before we do actual attacks and set real passwords, but this is a way that I can do that. Now, I'm going to uncheck user must change password next login because I don't want it to happen. I'm not going to check the password never expires because we know it expires in 160 days. We changed that already. So we say next, okay, and you can see J Smith is created and he's in the users. Cool. Okay, we're back. So now we've created John Smith. We're going to create Jane Smith in help desk, and we're going to use whatever naming convention we want. So what we're going to do is we're going to go in here and we're going to say new, and we're going to say we want a new user. Right? Now, we're going to say Jane Smith. Right? But the initials will be J Smith just like before. So what do? Well, typically what someone would do is do J Smith 1, right? And then if there's another J Smith at the company, we'll do 2, 3, etc., etc. So we're going to do J Smith 1. Now Jane is going to be I'm going to make sure she does not have to change her password. And then we're going to go ahead and hit finish. Now, Jane Smith is going to be help desk user. So what that means is later, after we build this lab out and we stand up a Windows machine and we have Jane Smith log into that Windows machine, she should be able to log into the domain controller also and change John Smith's password. And that's the goal, right? She's help desk. That's what we want her to do. So now if we actually log out and log back in, which I'm not going to do because time, it just makes no sense. But if I were to log out and log back in as Jane, I would have access to Active Directory to change those accounts, but I would not have access to do some of the other admin tasks that we're doing, right? So that's why we delegated permissions. Now, if you remember, we only delegated permissions to the users, right? We did not delegate permissions to admins, groups, any of that stuff. So they shouldn't be able to control everything, just the users, which is what we want, right? So we've got some of our user groups, right? We've got our groups here, security groups. And if you look, we should have 4, right? We got admins, we got users, we got service accounts, whatever. And we need to assign everybody to a group. So our regular users, we'll go to John Smith, go to properties, and we'll go to member of, and he's a member of just domain users, but what we'll do is we'll make him a member of Stuffy24 users. You always click check names and see underlines, boom. So now he's a member of Stuffy24 users, which may not mean anything, but once we set permissions, it will mean something because we'll lock down what he can and can't do based on the group permissions. So if we go here and we go to users, he now belongs to this group. So now when we go here, you'll see members, John Smith. Perfect. So now we actually have some control. And we can actually start adding GPOs to these security groups. So then we can have set permissions specifically to people we want. So this is where you guys need to think outside the box, and not really outside the box, just think of what you want your company to look like, because your company needs to have security groups in place, this is where you should be standing it up and getting members added. Now, I'm going to set all this up myself the way my company is going to work. I'm going to have security policy I'm just going to walk you guys through it. I'm going to have a security policy for my computers, which will be just workstations and servers. It's the only 2 groups I'm going to do. I'm going to keep it simple so that you guys can follow along and build it out as you go, however you want. I'm going to have service accounts. I'm going to have admins, help desk, and help desk is only going to have 3 or 4 users, and it's just because we're not really using them. We're going to use them later way later down the road when we do things like pivot. If we can get a hold of a help desk account, we can start to change passwords and get access to other accounts, etc. And then we're going to go and we're going to have access to users, right? Or we're going to set a GPO for users. So I'm going to set up all my GPOs. I'm going to set up all my user groups, which they're already set up, but I'm going to apply GPOs to them and everything else. And then I'm going to get everything set up the way I want for my company. I want you guys to do the same thing. And if you notice, I'm only going to mess with this Stuffy Corp. I'm not going to mess with anything else. And that's just because I want to keep it separate. I want to keep it simple for you guys, all of that stuff. So then we'll go ahead and do all of that stuff. We'll set up the help desk, the service accounts, all that stuff. Now, you don't have to get crazy with it yet, but this will give us the option of when we actually set up our first machine, we can join the domain and use these accounts to start logging in and doing things, right? So those are the things that are very important that we need to start doing. So hopefully this gets you guys going, because you have to set these up. If you don't set them up, it's just going to be by default, which is fine, but that's not realistic. Most companies are not going to just have a default policy. They will have, like up here on the group policy editor, they will have a group policy that's default, but it's changed, and then it'll be different for each type of employee, right? So you just setting up the default, it's somewhat realistic, but the problem is you saw there's a 7-character password limit, stuff like that. We don't want any of that, and we're going to change all of that because we want the admins to have a longer password. We want the regular users to have a mid-level password, things like that. And we want to use those later to pivot. So that's what we're going to do. So we're going to go ahead and change that. I'm going to get it all set up. Next video, we will build our first server, which you can see if you remember from the DC video. I have the server built. I'm just going to change it from a DC to something else. And then we're going to join the domain as that server and start standing up our first application, and so our first web applications and things like that we can start to take advantage of. And we're going to use service accounts to stand those up. So make sure you create a service account. Now, you don't have to create it yet. You can create it when you stand up the application. I find it a little bit easier to do that because then you can name it whatever the application is and things like that. But that's neither here nor there. Try not to get in the habit of ever using your own account or your admin account to do service accounts, meaning to set up services. Try not to do that. So we're going to try not to do that. You guys try not to do that. And from here, you guys should have a pretty good baseline of how to set up your policies. Now, one thing I recommend, and I can cover it once our labs are kind of more set up, I can build it out for you guys. But one thing I recommend greatly is really take the time, build out your policies, and then write down your policies. Right. Also, one other thing is in the next video, once we join a domain, we don't need to currently, but if you remember, we stood this up as a DNS server, and this will be the time server. If you notice, the time says 5:40 a.m. or whatever. It's not the right time, but well, you can't see it, but there you go. So the time is completely off. It doesn't really matter because I'm it's a set up separate VM or separate home lab. But if you want the time to sync up properly, you need to set up an NTP server and things like that. So that's all on the domain controller. You can set it all up. I'm not going to do the NTP. I don't care about the time. As long as all the times are the same, it's fine. So I will just use this as the authoritative server for the time. But the DNS server, we are going to have to start adding. So for instance, once we stand up our next web server, we need to add a DNS entry for that website, right? So that's what we're going to do next. So hopefully this helps you guys. Hopefully you guys start creating your policies, your group policies, your OUs, your groups, your users, all that stuff. Next time we come in here, you'll see that I have admins, I have help desk, I have users, I have policies, I have all that stuff. And again, the reason I'm not going to walk you guys through it is I want you guys to get in there and I want you guys to go through them and see what applies to your company, things like that. And if you're not building a fake company, if you're just building a home lab, still try and think of it that way, right? Think of your home lab as your company. So let me know what you guys think. Hopefully you guys like the home lab series that we've done so far, and hopefully this is helping you guys build up your repertoire, because Active Directory controls every other thing part of this lab. And the reason we're using Active Directory is because it's most widely used, right? You can use other things, but domain controllers are pretty much vital, whether they're in the cloud or on-prem or whatever. And then once this is built, we now have a central hub where we can actually start to get our computers, because what you'll see is as we take a computer and we join the domain, it will populate in this little computer, or in this little computers category right here. And then we'll have to move it into our workstations or our servers, depending on what we do. Otherwise, it just sits in this little computers because it's automatically on the domain. So what we'll do is we'll set up this computers, we'll set a GPO there where it doesn't have access to anything, because we don't want people to join our domain and not have proper permissions. So we have to move them. That's the idea, right? So that's one way that people can control how you access their network. So if you just walk in, plug in the network, and join the domain, well, it'll fall into an automatic bucket that they can then establish as don't give them permission until we manually say, or you can automate it, but say, go into this bucket and have these permissions. So hopefully this helps. Hopefully you guys are actually learning something from this, because this is something that people do all the time. And this gives you a huge amount of leg up when you're actually going and applying for jobs, because if you've already stood up domain controllers, you already understand how service accounts work, you already understand how web application communicates, things like that. All those things come into play, especially when hacking, because if I get access to your domain controller, does it help if I don't know what a domain controller is or how it works or how to apply things? Because think about not getting caught, right? If I got access to an admin account and I came in here and I started changing all the passwords and stuff, they're going to be like, well, obviously someone's on our system, right? If I come in here and I make a small adjustment to group policy or something like that, that actually gives me a lot more access and nobody notices, that's a much more attainable goal than simply trying to pivot into an admin account where I'm changing his password and now all of a sudden he notices because he can't get on the network. So understanding it makes a huge difference. So thanks, guys. Hope you guys have a great day. And once again, please sub and like the video to help me keep growing. I appreciate you guys. Thank you for the support.